Heat.
I was waiting for that. Welcome to the Heat Beat Podcast. I'm your host, Franky G, and with me today is insane in the membrane capologist himself, co-producer, co-founder of Miami Heat Beat, Mr. Brian Goins. Brian, how are you doing today?
Damn, that's a lot. Can we stick with one? I feel like that's a long title to put like on a business card. What can we like shorten that to?
I totally forgot what G does for his intros. I've never done an intro for you, so I was just
producer and co-founder usually, but I don't know. I like the cap stuff that you added into it. I feel like that is my like purpose on Miami Heat Beat now. I don't really do like the film breakdown that you and Bon and pretty much everyone else on Heat Beat does. I'm like the only guy that knows how to do the cap numbers. But you know what? I play my role really well, and this is my time to shine this time of the year. To be honest, I wasn't really excited doing any of this cap stuff up until maybe this past week. I was kind of bummed. I was off Twitter for a while because of the whole Game 7 loss against Boston at home that Jimmy Butler shot at the end. Still have nightmares about that to this day. But
I'm just glad the Celtics lost. Me too.
That made me feel a little bit better to get back into the swing of looking at transactions again. But for a while, I wasn't ready to come back and even just think about like the future of this Heat team. So
100%. And I'm with you, Brian. I was looking at the free agency list this week, getting ready for this show, and I was just depressed at the options if PJ walks. And as if you're not listening to basketball on Twitter and all the information out there, it's looking like PJ is going to the 76ers. And the Heat are tasked with finding a replacement for their do-it-all power forward. Finding a power forward in this economy who can guard 1 through 5. It probably isn't happening. I think they're going to have to switch up their defense in some respect. Either they're going to go bigger or they're going to look for a Jay Crowder type power forward, somebody who can guard big wings, can help at the rim, take charges, stuff like that. Somebody at the 4 who's going to play – be able to guard Jason Tatum, Trae Young, James Harden. That's probably not happening. So we can start right there, replacing PJ Tucker. Free agency, I don't think there's many options. We had our Lefty Leif, Greg Sylvander of the 5 Reasons podcast, talk about some potential replacements, which are on my list, the guys that fit what the Heat are looking for, what they need, and what they've been rumored. Kyle Anderson and TJ Warren being those 2 names. I really like TJ Warren as a rehab guy. He was supposedly cleared in March, coming off
his injury. His injury is pretty bad though. He's had like 2 pretty severe like foot breaks. Like he tore.
I think he's played like 4 games since the bubble.
Yeah, and it was a whole like Lisfranc injury he was playing with. Same thing that Goran was playing with, but he actually like tore it twice, and he had surgery on it twice. I know he was basically cleared to play from what it seemed like towards the end of the last season, but obviously the Pacers were tanking, so they didn't play him. So I have no idea what he looks like. Obviously, he had a great stretch during the bubble where he looked great, and obviously in that first round he was pretty bad again, but obviously he was hurt. So I guess I know he's notably not a great like spacer. He can hit the mid-range, but he's not a great 3-point shooter. He did have that stretch in the bubble where he did shoot it pretty well, but for his career, he's not really considered like a 3-point specialist by any stretch. And also his defense isn't particularly great either. So I like the idea if maybe you wanted to bring him in as maybe an Oladipo replacement off the bench to like give you some juice to like any scoring juice off the bench. That would be nice, and especially if we can get him discounted like on a really good deal, kind of like what they did with Oladipo getting it on the minimum. I would like that if that was the case for Miami, but I wouldn't really want to give him much of a portion of the mid-level if possible. I like to say that for really, I think they need to get, if they lose PJ, a 4 or a 5 that can stretch the floor. And I know there's names we'll probably get into later in the show, but the one on top of my head is Mo Bamba would be the one I would consider setting aside portion of that mid-level. And we can get into a lot of things. Just a tease. Yeah, no, it's to tease because I did tweet out.
We'll get to him.
Yeah, I did tease that. I just want to say, because I know people on here probably like, can you get to the thing I teased on my Twitter timeline earlier, like 30 minutes ago? I will get into that.
Yeah, 100%. No, but I just wanted to talk about TJ real quick because, you know, this floor spacing that PJ provided, 41% from three is great. But he only took 2.7 threes a game. TJ Warren over his last 2 seasons, yes, barred with injuries, doing the 2 seasons, he averaged 3.7 threes and shot 41.4%, which a sliver less than PJ did on more shot attempts, and he's more scoring. He brings more scoring to the game. He averaged 19.1 over the last 2 seasons he's played. Obviously, the foot injury is big, which is something that makes me feel like this would be like a 1-year deal. You know, earn some money for the next season with more teams having cap space and stuff as like a prove it deal.
I like how we start out the show with TJ Warren as our leading topic.
We gotta get people in. We gotta get people in. But he's a guy that's a low value buy.
Jimmy hates him, doesn't he? Still,
I don't care. I think Jimmy's one of those guys that if you aren't willing to fight him, he doesn't want you on his team.
Would be like the equivalent of like a pass Heat player? That would be like Dwayne. No, would it be like no? Because LeBron James did play with Lance Stevenson. Who would it be like? I guess like if the Heat brought in Tyler Hansborough. And then UD was still on the roster or something like that. I don't know. Is that like equivalent of like
Wade played with Rondo? Anything could happen.
That is true. To kick him in the nuts.
And let's talk about Kyle Anderson real quick before we get into the big tease. I don't think he's a starter level either. He kind of lost his playing time with the Grizzlies, but he brings some playmaking. He brings some passing and some finishing. Guy that's been rumored to the Heat a couple times. They've liked him in the past. He's another guy that's just would be here to reclaim value, short-term deal, try to get a big deal in the offseason. He's not super athletic. They don't call him slow-mo for no reason. What do you think about that? Like, is this a bet minimum? To be honest,
I hate his game.
Really?
Yeah, I do not. I don't see like I don't see like anything in him that would make me want him to Miami. Like Miami already plays with a slow pace as is. Bring him in, like especially if he's starting at the 4. Whew, I don't think he could. I don't think he could handle like Miami's up tempos like at times with Lowry on the floor. Like basically, they would have to play a slower offense around him because that's how slow he is. I don't hate him in terms of his defense. I know people say he's a 3-and-D player. I don't really like his 3-point shot because he has a weird release too. That's another thing I don't like about his game. It's like he has a really weird shot form. Like his release is just unorthodox to say the least. But yeah, I mean, if you can get him still cheap, like a minimum guy, I'd be down for it too. It just depends on, I guess, the price and his role. Right. If he's a starting 4, though, I think Miami definitely downgrades from PJ.
No. He's definitely not your starting 4. That would be awful. He's not going to fit. That's a bench guy.
But having him as an extra wing defender off the bench, I'm for it.
Yeah, that's what it would be. Now that we got the people in, we got you invested, we got you bored with these end of the bench options. Let's get into the real topic. Jalen Brunson is rumored to meet with the Miami Heat. A lot of people are suggesting this was a move to prevent tampering. This is what all of us thought. Some of us were joking. We don't even know if Pat would show. But according to 5 reasons, there is some smoke. There is some smoke to this. There's like genuine heat. No pun intended. But Brian, explain to the audience why Jalen Brunson makes sense in a sign and trade for Miami. What could they benefit? Without getting into too much of the numbers.
Yeah, I think let's get into the news before we get into the cap breakdown, because I want to share my screen real quick because this is where the news is coming from. And so I responded to a tweet from Chris Haynes where he said free agent guard Jalen Brunson's granting meetings to both Dallas, New York, and dark horse Miami Heat on the first day of free agency, which is tomorrow at 6 p.m. League sources tell Yahoo Sports. In his story, he basically mentioned that if Miami were to make that trade, it would have to be in a sign and trade, which obviously for Heat fans, I feel like we pretty much know how sign and trades work. We've gone through it now twice in the last 3 or 4 off seasons with Jimmy and Kyle Lowry. Actually, last 3 seasons. Yeah, so 2 of the last 3 seasons, Miami has conducted a sign trade, which is pretty rare. Teams don't normally conduct sign trades, but Miami happens to be one of the ones that, if they want a free agent, they're able to still put together salary in order to kind of get whatever free agent that they want to acquire. Now, this is one that I wasn't expecting, and I even tweeted out saying it feels as unexpected as the LaMarcus Aldridge rumors, which, if you recall, back, I think, in 2012, 2014, I think it was 2014, Miami had basically no cap that year, and Pat Riley was still able to get a meeting with LaMarcus Aldridge and his agent. And I think even Leif asked him at like an all-star game years later about that meeting and how convincing Riley was to try to get him to sign for a mid-level for 1 year so that they could eventually basically offer him, like the max contract, which they would have had cap space that following off season. Which the same off season, I think they tried going after Durant. So it was kind of funny how that all played out. Back then, they had the meeting. Obviously, he didn't sign for Miami. He signed with San Antonio for the full max at the time. But this feels quite as unexpected as that rumored. This meeting, however, was when I was looking. I think Mark Stein tweeted it out. He basically said it wasn't Miami that asked for the meeting. It was actually Jalen Brunson's, I guess, whatever you call his crew, people. his people basically asked to have a meeting with Miami. And I guess Miami agreed. That's the only way Miami is doing this meeting is if they agreed to it. So, and as 5 Reasons reported, Ethan Skolnick, this is real. It's not fake interest. Miami has real interest in him. Obviously, the rumors have been that New York is the leading candidate to get him. I think if Miami is a dark horse, it actually helps Dallas because obviously New York has spent the better part of the last week clearing salary to give him his about $22 million a year salary right now. It feels like a leverage play. Yeah, someone did mention that. I'll post this on here.
Schlutler.
It does definitely sound like a leverage play. It also does sound like a way to possibly avoid some tampering.
Yeah.
But let's just say for the matter of fact that, Ethan Skolnick is right. Miami has interest and that Jalen Brunson is really possibly interested in hearing what Miami has to offer. And who knows what happens at these meetings. And, Miami almost swung Kevin Durant to Miami in one of their meetings with Eric Spoelstra because of just how convincing they are with their culture, their staff, their everything that they do in their meetings to convince players to come here. Same thing with Gordon Hayward back then too. So, I mean, say they get him in a meeting, obviously Andy's going to show up to the meeting and show him exactly the number that they could afford him at. And I'll get to the numbers in a second, but basically they'll tell him, hey, we can give you the exact same offer that New York is going to give you, no state income tax, and you get to play on a championship contender that was just one shot away from making it to the NBA Finals. I mean, he was in the Western Conference Finals this past season, and he seems like a competitor. I think he won a championship with Villanova, if I'm not mistaken. So he is a competitor that would probably want to play as long as he gets, that salary that he's looking for and the starting role. That's also important here too. I think there's definitely some real, it's not something that I would shy away from in terms of Miami having interest in him. I think it's very real. And I think there is definitely a way for Miami to make it happen. But in order to make it happen, it's going to require some cap maneuvering. And I'll get into that right now.
Awesome. I think some fans are a little down on Jalen Brunson. Some people are saying it's a downgrade from Kyle if they make that trade. Yeah. Just to give you a number on Jalen Brunson's numbers, without Luka, he averaged 22.2 points per game on 50% from the field, 36 from three, 82 from the free throw line. So a true shooting percentage of 57%. Yeah. 7.2 assists on 2 turnovers. Think like a little bit a slower version of Goran. He's got a post game. He's not a high stakes playmaker. Kyle's more of a high risk, high reward kind of playmaker. He's gonna have some bad turnovers. But Jalen's on the safer side. Think a little bit of older Goran Dragic. He thinks he has more to his game. He showed a lot in the playoffs for me. I've been a fan of his since college. He's a really tough player. You mentioned he is a champion in college. But I think the flexibility is the biggest thing in this trade, and what would happen in this trade. And you're gonna let's get into those numbers.
Yeah. So just get off really quickly. This is what I project his contract would be, and this would be a 4-year deal worth $112 million. You could start off that salary of 5% increment raises, same thing that they did with Lowry, same thing they did with Jimmy Butler. It's the most Miami can do with increment raises since they don't have his bird rights. Basically, it would be a $26 million starting salary. For reference, Kyle Lowry is making over $28 million right now this coming season. So if Miami did a 1-for-1 trade, which is basically what I'm projecting, and it's what I think would be most likely what would happen is they would trade Kyle Lowry, possibly a pick. I don't know what kind of pick they would send out. If it could be a future second rounder, it could be a swap, it could be a potential future first rounder, or it could just be a 1-for-1 trade straight up, because obviously Dallas, if they let him walk and he signs with New York, Dallas loses him for nothing. Now, I know there's rumors that Dallas maybe would try to see if they could maybe send a pick to New York and try to get them to take him in a sign and trade so that Dallas basically gets a trade exception back, which is possible. That trade section would be 50% of his new salary because of the base year compensation. But just to put this out there, if it did happen, Miami would basically be able to sign him at a $26 million salary. If you trade Kyle Lowry, you save that $2 million in cap space. Not cap space, it's their total cap. It helps them stay under the hard cap. There was already a report earlier today that the salary went up 1.3% this season, which we can get into that later. It's not really much to talk about with that, but basically Miami has more room to play with in terms of, fitting their payroll under the hard cap, which obviously if you do a sign and trade, Miami is now hard capped. Same thing that happened back with Jimmy Butler. Miami was hard capped that season, and same thing that happened last season with Kyle Lowry, where Miami was also hard capped. So here's my scenario. Actually, this is also including another trade that I'm projecting too, based on some rumors that we've also been, following. Some other reputable sources like Leif, I think we mentioned earlier. He's basically been reporting that Miami has real trade interest in John Collins. And apparently that Collins deal would try to be something where they could try to steal him from Atlanta. Atlanta just made a trade today for DeJounte Murray, where they gave up 3 first-round picks plus a pick swap. So it would seem like if Miami wanted to get him for real cheap, they could potentially move Duncan Robinson and 2 minimum salary contracts, which in this scenario, I gave up Omer Yurtseven and Haywood Highsmith.
Yeah,
those 3 players would give you enough to acquire John Collins in a trade back to Miami. And then Miami would basically be able to fit him under the hard cap in that trade, along with Jalen Brunson in that trade with Kyle Lowry. So you're basically giving up, 4 players for 2. You have 2 empty roster spots. I added 2 vet minimum contracts, because that's basically what you have left. And then also, here's what gets really interesting. So Miami also would be able to, because now they're hard capped, part of the rumors that we've been hearing these last few days, especially I think today, Anthony Chang reported it, but basically Miami doesn't want to use the full non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is worth $10.5 million this season, starting salary. If Miami's hard capped after making that Jalen Brunson deal, there's nothing stopping them from wanting to use the full mid-level now that they're hard capped. So in this scenario, I projected that they're going to use the full mid-level. It doesn't have to be every single dollar amount. Miami had the full mid-level last season when they were hard capped, and they only gave $7 million to PJ Tucker, and that's it. They didn't use their full entire portion of mid-level. But if you use more than 6.5 is now the new taxpayer mid-level.
Yeah,
because they did go up 1.3%.
Yeah.
So if they use more than that, then they're hard capped regardless, even if they don't use a full non-taxpayer. So if they want to sign basically an outside free agent, this is their best tool to use to sign an outside free agent, is this full non-taxpayer mid-level. If they do this hard cap trade and then they do the Duncan trade, this is their best chance to get a guy that might be a potential starter, a potential player off the bench. I think this could be potentially PJ Tucker's deal if you want to bring him back and you don't want him to basically go to Philly. You can bring him back on this contract, which is what he's basically trying to get out of Philly. So yeah, this could potentially be a way to bring back PJ and you can have him off the bench if you bring in John Collins. So that we were talking about trying to get a starting forward that would help limit his minutes over the season. This would be the way to do it. So I think that could be a possibility. Also, there's other options out there in the market too. I mean, there's plenty of them. There's Batum. You got Bobby Portis, but I think he might return to Milwaukee. You have Mo Bamba. So whatever like starting front court player or bench player that you would want, this would be the best tool in order to acquire that outside free agent. And you can split between two players if you want. I'm just putting it for one player right now, but if you split between two players, that works. And you don't have to give them the full 10.5. Like I said, you can give them a little bit less like Miami did last season with PJ Tucker. So in this scenario, I have a full mid-level used up on here. And then I'll also account it for a biannual too, because that also hard caps Miami if you use the biannual. So there's 3 ways Miami gets hard cap. You do a sign and trade, you use the full mid-level over 6.5 million, or you use the biannual exception. If you use any of those 3 methods or exceptions, but Miami's hard cap. So I'm already projecting their hard cap. They use all these exceptions because they need to basically fill out the rest of the roster as best as they can.
Yeah. And
I think they can bring back Caleb Martin for that amount is my projection too. I already have Nikola Jovic's new salary on here. And then the rest of the roster is going to be filled with minimums. And then you have Gabe Vincent and Max Strus still on the roster on their minimum contracts too.
So we got a lot of questions here in the chat about this. A lot of people questioning not trading Lowry for if they weren't going to trade him for Kyrie. I think part of that, I don't think Mickey very clear with that anti-vaxxer tweet that he was never going to sign off on that.
Yeah, and I saw that too.
Good comparison to bring that up, guys. And I wouldn't it might not be here, but I would not be surprised if Pat looked to trade Kyle Lowry in a deal that made the team better. He traded Eddie Jones, the captain of the team, one of the guys that a lot of people were like, why are you drafting Dwayne Wade when you have Eddie Jones? Eddie Jones was a guy that Pat loved and wanted to be here forever, got him here. And in order to try to win a championship when they fell short in 2005 in the Eastern Conference Finals and to get better with better depth, they traded a really good player who was the captain of the team, who meant a lot to Pat Riley, and they got better. They got 3 starters out of that. So in Brian's scenario here, you trade Kyle Lowry, you trade Duncan Robinson, you get 2 starters, and you still have access to your full mid-level exception. So you can possibly bring back PJ Tucker if he wants to go. I don't know if it might be a role thing with him. He might want the money, the guarantee, and the starting spot, which I wouldn't blame him. It's up to him. But you make a compelling case.
What do you get to start? Well, here's the thing. Here's on the flip side of that. What do you get the starting spot in Philly if they still keep Tobias Harris on their contract? Because right now, it seems like from what I understand, they have now the money in order to acquire PJ Tucker, given the full non-taxpayer mid-level, because James Harden opted out today. And because he opted out, he's basically going to work with Philly in their front office to sign at a discounted. It's not going to be a full max, but it's going to be a discounted rate over years where he's going to get guaranteed money, but take a small discount, average salary wise, so that they can fit both exceptions of the biannual and the full non-taxpayer mid-level, which they would use the full non-taxpayer mid-level to bring in PJ. But if Tobias Harris is still on that roster, I don't think he starts. I think he comes off the bench still.
Yeah, I agree. So that's up to PJ right there. But in this example, not listed is Victor Oladipo, which has been a hot discussion amongst fans as well. In this scenario, if the Heat wanted to, could they bring back Victor Oladipo as well?
Yes, they could. I didn't project for it because I do think he is most likely of all the free agents Miami has outside of Dedmon to not come back. It seems like him of any player he really wants his role because he's looking basically still for it's not going to get a minimum contract. I think I saw reports from Jake Fisher from Bleacher Report that he was going to look for a taxpayer mid-level deal. I think the 3 teams that were mentioned were Denver, Washington. I can't remember the 3rd team off the top of my head.
So hold on. We got a question in the chat. Can we sign Depot for the mid-level exception? I asked this question too. So
yeah, they could, but I don't think that would be the smart way to do it. So let's look at what I have right here currently. So yes, you could sign Depot. Take a look at the bottom right here where it says apron hard cap space. That's how much space Miami has to basically fill up the rest of the roster. without going over the hard cap. So that hard cap number is currently projected at 156,983 million. Miami has $6 million in playing room to basically bring in Oladipo, and basically it'd be a little bit more than 6 million, because if you swap out the debt minimum, that's 1.8 right now.
Yeah,
add 6 million to that, so you can bring in Oladipo for almost nearly $8 million. I projected him more at 10, but if the reports are true that he's looking for a taxpayer mid-level, which is 6.5 right now, Miami could give him a little bit more, like an $8 million deal, still be under hard cap, and they can bring him with his bird rights, not have to use the full non-taxpayer mid-level.
So they can bring back Depot, and still use the full mid-level if they wanted to.
If they wanted to, yeah. And you just basically swap out one of these vet minimums for Oladipo.
And that's, I think that roster, like, I love Lowry, I love PJ, but at the end of the season, the team ran out of gas. They needed more. They needed more offensive juice, and I think they needed to be a little younger. I think the relying on the veterans all season long. PJ broke down. Kyle was broken, was crumbling across the finish line. Jimmy was limping. Tyler couldn't even go. You saw a lot of these guys just needed help, and I think the scoring punch, the youth and athleticism could be a help. If you're bringing back almost the whole team, plus John Collins, plus Jalen Brunson, and Nikola Jovic, which we have to talk about him more. And only losing Kyle, I think you can arguably say that's a better team.
Obviously. And I think this would be even a better way of them using their exceptions. So obviously we were rejecting PJ Tucker to sign for the non-taxpayer mid-level and using that exception only, but that means Miami wouldn't be able to sign any outside free agents with that. So here's a scenario where Miami gets PJ Tucker and can still use a non-taxpayer mid-level, but this basically would eliminate Oladipo from coming back from this scenario.
Even if they use the mid-level on him?
Well, they could use the mid-level on him, yes, but...
Or just use his bird rights?
I mean, I guess in that way, yeah, if you can try to convince them to sign for like 6.5, then you're left with maybe 4 that you can use on your mid-level to bring into someone else. Depends on what Caleb Martin's value is if he comes back to. So there's ways that, they can still bring Oladipo at around 8 to 10 million, but then you're basically limited to bringing in only 2 of PJ, Caleb, and Depot back in this scenario, because you're using the full non-taxpayer mid-level on somebody else. So I think they want to try to bring in an outside free agent, and they might try to bring in 2 players with that full non-taxpayer mid-level.
We have a lot of questions about Tyler.
Yeah.
Real quick, a lot of questions about Tyler. Tyler's salary is 5.7 right now. That's gonna, no matter if he agrees to an extension now or later or middle of the season, his money is set for this season. The extension would take into effect next season. So do not worry about Tyler's money. Tyler can get, they could agree to a max extension if they did right now. Tyler's still getting paid 5.7 next year. This has nothing to do with Tyler.
This is last year of his rookie salary. Miami can offer him an extension, I think, up until the beginning of the season is the deadline to offer that extension. So you don't have to agree to it right now to start off this free agency period, because they can still work on trades if they want and use them in the trade. But if they give him that extension, they're basically not able to trade him until, I believe, January 15. It would be his new date of when they could trade him. So I think right now Miami is not in a rush to get him his extension. They'll probably talk to him, figure out what his market is in terms of what he's looking for, and they can maybe make an agreement. But if they're maybe trying to think about, swinging high for one of those whales which are on the market, they're going to want Tyler Hero to be available to use in a trade still, if that happens. So if they don't, basically, if they sign for an extension right now, you're putting yourself out of trading him until at least January 15 at the earliest. So don't worry about that in terms of Tyler Hero's contract. But I did want to mention one more thing, because I know people are probably going to look at this and be like, but Brian, why do you have Miami negative 635,000 in the hard cap? So obviously these are all like the top salaries that I'm projecting. Like Jalen Brunson, I showed you, was that 4-year, $113 million offer. And then obviously the full non-taxpayer mid-level. You don't have to use, I told you earlier, you don't have to use the full amount on that one player. You can put it on 2 players, or you can sign them for a little bit less than this This is just the most Miami can offer in terms of that exception, the value of it. But to, basically $635,000 is not hard to basically ask Jalen Brunson and whoever to use on the non-taxpayer mid-level to reduce their checks by like $300,000 for year one. It's not that hard to fit under the hard cap. And I think Miami could easily ask them to take a small pay cut in order to put this roster together and bring back PJ.
100%. And guys, so the hard cap isn't something that like you're like, it's the top. You can't pass that. It's not something like that. For example, the Warriors, they paid a salary of their team payroll was $178 million. They were a hard cap team, but that they went over the hard cap as a team. You have things to maneuver with and play with the salary cap to improve your team. And this is why Andy Ellisberg is one of the best in the business, because he knows better.
So just so you can clarify, because I'm not sure if what you said was correct. Miami can't cross $166,983,000 for the whole year.
No, but I'm saying like it's not that. That's not the hard cap that you're on. That's the apron that you're showing right there.
Yeah, that is the hard cap. Hard cap apron is the same thing. Hard cap apron is basically $7 million added on to the luxury tax, and basically no team, if they're hard cap, can cross that number at any point in any signing, any trade. They have to be under that number always. They can't go over it by $1. They can't go over by a single dollar at any point in the season in any trade, any acquisition that they make.
Okay, but there are. Like over time, there are exceptions to like bird rights and stuff like that to go.
You have to fit that number underneath that number, that 156 million.
That's for that season.
For this season, correct. Next season, then that hard cap is gone, unless same thing happens again if they want to use a full non-taxpayer mid-level, which they would have available again next season because they'd be over the cap. And then also if they use the biannual, which I think if they use this season, then they wouldn't have access to it next season. So it really would only be if they do another sign trade or the non-taxpayer mid-level, if they use the full portion of it again next season. It's not just a full portion. It has to be more than the taxpayer mid-level portion of it.
Got you. My mistake. Way to explain that, Brian. So let's talk basketball for a little bit. If they get this lineup in, if they do something like this, hold on. What's this stopping them from doing something similar, but instead of Brunson just bringing Lowry back? Can they bring Collins in? Can they still bring back PJ at the mid-level and bring back Oladipo, let's say?
Yes. I know I did tweet out the other day that it is hard because if you're hard capped, you're basically limited to that amount. So obviously the numbers going up for this season, the projections going up by 1.3%, which I can share my screen and get you that real quick. But those projections help Miami in a way, but also hurts them too, because technically I feel like PJ is definitely going to want that full non-taxpayer level because that's the most money he can make. Yeah. So if that's the most money he can make, and it's going to be more than Miami's non-bird rights, which we can get into also for PJ, which is 8.5. The difference between 8.5 and this 10.5 is $2 million. I mean, obviously Philly has state tax. To be honest, I get asked this question. I don't know exactly how much it would be in like difference in salary of him getting taxed those 41 home games in Philly compared to not getting taxed 41 home games in Miami. Might be $2 million. I don't know for sure because I'm not really savvy in that tax stuff with income taxes and stuff. That's way different than the CBA. But let's just say that $2 million in salary, that's the difference between PJ signing with Miami or not. It can work under the hard cap, but it makes it a lot easier for Miami to trade Lowry for Brunson because, like I mentioned earlier, you can get Brunson at a cheaper contract this season than keeping Lowry on the roster.
Because the starting salary.
Because the starting salary with that 5% increment raise. Obviously, it's a longer deal. You're paying more guaranteed money over the course of 4 seasons. Obviously, Lowry is an expiring contract after next season, or after this season, right? Next season, he's an expiring salary. So in a way, Miami may value that if they want to use Lowry possibly as an expiring deal for a whale, if that's what they really want to do. But I think they could also say that, Brunson might have better trade value because he's younger, he's locked under contract, And in a way, like he's probably going to be better next season if they want to trade, or even this season if they want to trade him for something better than him. Like I think upgrading at the point guard spot, getting younger, getting a cheaper contract, someone that may potentially have better trade value, could be a reason why Miami wants him over keeping Kyle this season. I think that might be something they're considering. Like that might be like a really good reason why they would want to bring in Brunson if they really feel like he's an upgrade, not just on the roster, but also as a potential trade asset.
Yeah.
And if he's cheaper this season, like that makes it even better to fit everything under the hard cap, under the luxury tax, if they want to stay under the luxury tax. But like just bottom line, like I know the reports of PJ Tucker and Oladipo leaving Miami are they're pretty real. Like I don't think it's set in stone that they're gone, but it seems like it's leaning that way. We'll find out tomorrow.
And like finding, like I mentioned before, like finding somebody who does what PJ does at the 4 spot is impossible. I looked at all the rosters today, at all the teams, all the situations. There's with the play-in, realistically, you're looking about 24 teams in the league that are trying to make the playoffs. To get teams like Sacramento to willingly trade Harrison Barnes when they're trying to make the playoffs, to get Washington to try to trade Kyle Kuzma when they're trying to make the playoffs. Like, for us, making the playoffs is minimum. We want to win. We're trying to win the championship. This doesn't mean the same thing for every other team, every other fan base. Sometimes you look at Minnesota. They won that play-in game and they celebrated like it's a championship. This is different for everybody else. It's the same thing if the Dolphins won a playoff game. It's not the same thing if Tom Brady lost in the Super Bowl. There's different expectations for teams and different desires. There's about 6 teams that are looking to 5 or 6 teams that are looking to tank, or that are okay with missing the playoffs. Everyone else is really trying and going for it, so they're not looking to downgrade. So it's really hard to go amongst those shitty teams and get some value. You look at the Spurs, who are they just sold high on one of their young players, and they're looking to tank this season. There's not much out there that in trades. You're looking at guys at best. It's John Collins. It's Bogdanovich. If Utah goes backwards and they're trying to switch some things up, you want to get involved there. Kuzma, hopefully, those are the guys you're hoping for. Miles Turner, maybe a guy you can sneak in for. But those aren't sexy names. It's hard to win in the margins. You have to. The free agency class isn't sexy names. This is a way that Miami can manage its flexibility. If they get into the Brunson deal, they can get younger, like we've talked about. And they get more scoring punch because Brunson is a better scorer than Lowry at this stage of their careers. You mentioned he's almost a decade younger than him, or a decade younger than him, and he's got a lot to improve on. He's showed in the playoffs that he was a second leading scorer on a Western Conference Finals team. He set them up, led the team whenever Luka was out and hurt, and he did a fantastic job of that. Now, he'd be playing with less space in Miami, but that's why you look for guys like TJ Warren, John Collins. This is why you keep Max Strus. You play with your roster, you try to find fits there in the margins. There's this free agency class. You're looking at guys. One guy that I want to talk about, he's been rumored. The Magic announced today, well, not the Magic officially, but it was announced today. Magic aren't going to give this guy a qualifying offer, so he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. So Mo Bamba, former lottery top 10 pick, lottery guy, a lot of potential. Relationship with Bam was as a Kentucky guy, I believe he was. One of the best above the break shooters percentage wise in the NBA, and some shot blocking presence. What can the Miami offer him as just an unrestricted free agent?
So I can bring back what I've mentioned earlier, but if we're going with the same scenario with Miami, I mean, whatever, swap out Jalen Brunson or Kyle Lowry's name. Obviously, John Collins, it's not guaranteed that he gets traded to Miami, but say Duncan Robinson's on there, like basically that $23 million between that and Duncan is 16.9. So you're talking about Miami's taking in extra money to bring in John Collins in that trade. Mm-hmm. But let's just say, like, just keep this out of the side. Like, Miami could still use the full non-taxpayer mid-level. It's whether or not they want to hard cap themselves.
Right.
The reports were that they didn't want to because they wanted to be in the market to make trades.
Which is reasonable.
Is Jalen Brunson the trade that they want to make? Or is that because if they do a sign and trade, if they're going to meet with him, they know going in that they're going to hard cap themselves if they bring him in on this roster. So it seems like Miami is willing to go into the hard cap to bring him in a trade. Now, are they willing to get into the hard cap to bring in a mid-level guy and then just bring in John Collins? Is that enough for them to be in a hard cap and limit themselves in making future moves? That's a question that I really don't know what the answer is, but just say for the sake of argument that Miami is willing to be in the hard cap, then yes, they could bring in Mo Bamba and a lot of different salaries. They can bring him in as a 6.5 taxpayer mid-level, not pay the hard cap, or they can bring him at a bigger salary, up to 10.5 million using the full non-taxpayer mid-level. Now, obviously, is Miami going to want to give that to him, or would they rather give that to PJ Tucker? I guess it depends if they can get PJ Tucker to sign with his non-bird rights, which if that's the case, then we're looking at this scenario instead. Okay. And if it's this scenario, then PJ Tucker wouldn't matter. He wouldn't be signing with his mid-level. He'd be signing with non-bird rights, which would be $8.4 million, almost 8.5. And then you would still have that non-taxpayer mid-level to use to spend on a guy like Mo Bamba. It doesn't have to be the full 10.5. It could be a portion of it. Could be, same thing like Miami did last season. Like I mentioned earlier, PJ got $7 million, which was still less than the $10 million that they had last season. And they didn't use the rest of the $3 million that they had. So I just think, like, in a way, Miami can choose which player they want to bring in from one of these outside free agents. That's in that ballpark range of a mid-level guy, Mo Bamba being one of them. There's other guys out there in the market, but say that there is reports that Mo Bamba is a person that they really are looking into acquiring, and he's an unrestricted free agent. They don't have to wait 3 days to submit an offer sheet because he's a restricted free agent and wait for the other team to match. That also makes it easier for Miami to go after a guy like him rather than a guy like Lou Dort, who's a restricted free agent, who obviously he now doesn't have a team option anymore this season. And I'd love to bring him in Miami. I think he'd be a perfect 3-and-D guy on this roster who could play the 4. But it doesn't make sense for Miami to go after him and give him an offer sheet, knowing very well that the Thunder are going to match him, and it could take 3 days. And then in those 3 days, you're basically waiting on the market to dry up. And then once those 3 days are gone and the Thunder match, who's left in the market that you want to use your full non-taxpayer level on? It could be very well that PJ Tucker is gone by then. He signs with Philly, and then what are you looking at in the rest of the market? So I think if Miami does want to go after a guy, Mo Bamba being one of them does make sense because he's an unrestricted free agent. And Miami has the exception to use to get a guy like him on this team. And I think he'd be a perfect backup 5 and a potential starter, depending on, who else they bring in to fill in the rest of the roster and what they use Duncan's salary for in a trade, which I think they will try to trade him.
I have a question on the hard cap. Is that 156.98? Is that locked in for Miami?
It's still a projection right now, but there was new projection that was released by the NBA today, and I'll pull it up on here. Basically, the projected salary cap was bumped up to $123,665 million. Before today, it was 122, so it went up about 1.3 million from what was projected like as of yesterday or this morning. So what was later reported today. So yeah, it went up 1.3%. Kind of helps Miami in a way that they had a little bit more, room to play with the hard cap and the luxury tax. But it hurts them because that mid-level exception money went up now to 10.5 million. It was 10.2. It's not that much. It's like an extra 250,000 that PJ can now make with that exception money, or whoever ends up getting that mid-level. But yeah, I mean, in a way, like, does it hurt Miami? Yes, but it's not that bad. It's just, I mean, yeah, like the hard cap, obviously it going up is good because then Miami can still fit more contracts within that, amount, because they already have contracts on their roster. It's filling out the rest of it underneath that hard cap and filling out, with whatever exceptions that they want to use and any trades that they might acquire. Because when you make a trade and you're trying to fit in under hard cap, you have to basically almost match it dollar for dollar because it gets a lot harder than if you were not hard capped.
So it'd be easier if they matched, if the 4 they got, instead of like Collins, was like Miles Turner, who was a little bit who his number is 17.5, something like that.
Exactly. Like
Just an
something like
example.
that would make it a lot easier. You wouldn't even have to trade like minimum contracts to match up that salary wise. That's why that trade I mentioned earlier with Duncan and 2 minimums, which I projected Yurt and Highsmith. Those 3 guys, that's 3 players you traded for 1 guy. Obviously, that 1 guy, John Collins, might be worth it, I think, for Miami to do. But yeah, like for instance, if we just said Miles Turner, or there's a guy like Marcus Morris who's, within that range, like it makes it a lot easier for Miami to trade Duncan 1-for-1 for him and then just include a pick.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to address this comment here. The Brunson meeting is in New York. The Heat aren't signing them, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Because that might just be where his representation is.
I mean, by that theory, then Miami shouldn't have been able to sign LeBron James when he was a free agent because he took all his meetings in New York too.
Yeah, and Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade were both in Chicago, I believe.
Yep.
So like that doesn't mean anything, guys. Don't look into it that much. It might not happen. It might, the Heat might just.
It's leaning like it won't happen because of all the reports that we've seen, but we've seen crazier stuff happen with Miami. This is pretty up there though right now, but I'm telling you, like Miami has the contract to make it work, and we know that Dallas really liked Kyle Lowry last offseason. We know Mark Cuban was the one that submitted the tampering charge on Miami because he was pissed off that Miami was able to acquire him literally in the first minute of free agency, and they cleared up some cap space in order to try to get Kyle Lowry on Miami on that Dallas roster.
Yeah.
So I think if I was Dallas, if I was Mark Cuban, and I'm losing Jalen Brunson, I like to make a trade with Miami, hope that he picks Miami, and then they can make a deal work with Lowry. And it might not include any picks. Who knows?
Yeah, and if it is something that happens with Brunson, I definitely think they need to look at a defensive 2 like Victor Oladipo to start with him. He's a guy who can hit shots from deep, decent catch and shoot guy, 40% for his career. Good from the corners, and he's already here. He likes it here. He wants to be here. He just wants a chance to start. And I think with a Brunson, with a Brunson starter at the 1, you need somebody at the 2 and the 4 to complement him defensively. And that's why you're looking at guys like John Collins, which he's not a stopper, but he's long. He helps if he's active.
He's way more athletic than PJ. That's
exactly. He's he's younger. Like you saw flashes of what John Collins can be. He played in the playoffs hurt. And I think there's a lot more to pull out of him. Yeah. I think an organization like Miami can get that. He
loves Miami. He was from the area too, and he grew up in Miami Heat fan. I think that'd be a perfect fit for Miami. Like he's a great stretch forward right now, but I feel like he could be a better player. I know his passing is like not great, but I mean, how much passing are you expecting him to do? I mean, PJ didn't really do much passing either. Obviously, they had him do some different sets that he wasn't accustomed to instead of staying in the corner, but like it doesn't mean that he doesn't have that in his bag. We don't know. It's something that Atlanta's never really, tinkered with. He's basically more of like that, like role guy, and that can maybe stretch a couple of times a game. Yeah, I think bringing in John Collins, there might be more to his game that we're not aware of. And obviously Miami worked him out too. Let's not recall that Miami could have drafted him. They drafted Bam instead.
Best decision they've ever made. We know John Collins also worked out at the Deuces Podcast Network, Dos Minutos Driveway before the draft. Dos said he didn't have enough, and he recommended the Heat draft Bam Adebayo, which great decision by Dos. We got some recommendations in the chat. Cam Reddish, Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond. I don't want to see any of those guys in Miami. Cam Reddish, that's a flyer guy.
I liked Cam Reddish in the draft, but he's been really underwhelming in the NBA. Yeah, he's basically been the same player he was at Duke.
Yeah, and my concerns with a guy with Caleb taking his, a discount for Miami. He's turning 27 this year. He's probably going to want to take if he's going to come back to Miami, there's not better offers out there because of his injuries this season. He's probably going to want to do a shorter deal because he doesn't have many contracts left in his NBA career. he's gonna want to get some big money now, or later. You know, he's gonna want a prove it deal, an opportunity at that. So for a biannual exception, you've had him listed as one of the options, and let's talk into that. The biannual exceptions, what's the minimum on the contract that has to be?
Repeat that one more time. Sorry, I'm looking at other tweets.
Like, so I know for like the taxpayer mid-level, it's got to be a 3-year deal. What kind of restrictions does the biannual have?
Oh, yeah. So the biannual right now is worth currently 4.1 million starting salary. It has to be a 2-year deal if you use the biannual.
Can you do an opt-out?
You can, yeah, you could do the second year could be like a team option or a player option. So yeah, it could be a 1-and-1. It just has to be a 2-year contract signed using it. Second year doesn't have to be guaranteed either. It could be like partially guaranteed if you want. But in terms of using the biannual, like I said earlier, if you use it, then you're also hard capped. So just to like give you like history on like the biannual, it's like one of the most very rarely used exceptions because it's only $4 million. Most NBA players don't sign for $4 million. There's very handful of players that will take that exception as a starting salary. But I think Caleb could be a guy that you can convince to take it as a 1-and-1 deal and have him because you already had him under contract last year. You have 1 year of control on him. If you get the second year, you open up early bird rights next season, and you can do something very similar to what Milwaukee is now doing with Bobby Portis, where they're going to use early bird rights to sign him to a deal that's a little bit over the average salary, which is basically like a slightly higher version of the non-taxpayer mid-level. But the difference is you're not hard capped by doing an early bird rights deal. And I think Caleb, if he still plays to the way he played last season or even a little bit better, he could get that offer next year. And I think Miami would give it to him. And I think that would be beneficial for him. Like he can make a slight raise this season, play on a 1-year, $4 million contract. And then next year, he can maybe play himself to a contract that's worth almost $11 million starting salary.
And for Miami, Caleb is a guy that he's obviously an athlete and stuff like that. Like I think they need to get more athletic, and that's one of the reasons I would like them to get younger. You get guys like John Collins, who, when healthy, is a very athletic big man, one of the more athletic ones in the league. One of the few guys I could see as a possible PJ exception, replacement, is like a guy like Bruce Brown. And I just want to talk about some of the names in free agency real quick. Bruce Brown signed his qualifying offer with the Brooklyn Nets last year, so now he's an unrestricted free agent. He's a guy who had to play a lot of small ball four. He kind of created this power guard position where they had him as basically the power forward at 6'3", 6'4", and he was guarding up, down, everywhere, all around. Working the short roll. He shot 40% from 3 this year, not on a lot of attempts, but he's, my University of Miami guy, athletic, can make plays off the bounce. And they need athletes. I think athletes and scoring is their biggest problem. They have to get better at scoring without sacrificing too much defensively. So you get a guy like Bruce Brown who brings a little bit of both, is not a guy who can't score, can't go out and play in transition, can play in the half court, can make plays for others. You get guys like that. There's another option that I really like. If you lose Victor Oladipo, you got a decent guard. Gary Harris is a guy I'd really like at a mid-level defensive guard, can hit threes. There's not a lot out here in transition, and in free agency, but there's guys you can use, and I'm sure the Heat are going to call about Otto Porter. Guys like Jalen Smith. I would like Jalen Smith as another flyer I'd like them to take. Mo Bamba, Thomas Bryant, Isaiah Hartenstein. These guys are attainable guys that can fit in their system. I feel like Serge Ibaka, I would take a flyer on him. If he
as a minimum guy, I'd take him as a minimum guy.
You got a guy who can space the floor, can play big with Bam, can play at the 5 by himself. And you get guys like that. Like there's not a ton on the market that you're going to be excited about. This isn't like Heat with cap space and like, hey, Zach LaVine, let's come over here. Those were all pipe dreams. Unfortunately, Bradley Beal is not forcing his way over here. Zach LaVine's a clutch guy. He's not forcing his way over here.
All those guys are going to sign day one. Like first few minutes of free agency, they're signing back with their teams because they make more money signing with them as with their bird rights, and especially in Bradley Beal's case, he can get the supermax if they actually offer it to him. Is one thing, but he could sign it, and like he won't be able to be traded for a year until next season. But like that's what he wants. He wants to get the money, and then and really in a year, like once he gets the money, I'm sure he'll find out pretty soon if he still wants to stay there or not. Chances are he's going to stay there the rest of his career. He's going to stay it out. But like a guy like him, like he gets his money, he could easily ask for a trade at any point next season and later on in his contract. So there's really like no rush for him to leave now and miss out on a shit ton of money that can change his, his entire family's future. Like it's generations worth of money that he'd be passing the table to leave for like a small chance at winning a championship. Because I don't think adding him alone and losing a lot of the guys that would take to get him on this roster is worth it for Miami.
It'd be different if it's like they had something easy to make a trade and
his starting salary is crazy. That's over 40 million, and when you get that high, especially for hard cap, that's just billing out the rest of our roster becomes way harder than like the trade that we were hopefully going to talk about in the show, but like the Kyrie or KD trades that we were thinking could possibly be, happening, but obviously we're not right now. But those trades, if that would have been, with them using their contracts from this season and not as like a sign and trade, way easier because you don't have to be hard capped. You trade match a lot easier. Like there's so many benefits of not doing a sign and trade. But in the case for Jalen Brunson, if he's making less than Kyle, it makes it a lot easier trade match. So just putting it out there. But one thing I did want to get into also is I really do like the Otto Porter as a potential replacement for PJ. I know we didn't talk about him. There's reports that he may potentially leave Golden State because he might be able to get more than the mid-level that they can offer him, which would be more than so Miami has a mid-level that it could offer that could be more than Golden State, which is the 6.4 taxpayer mid-level. Plus they're already, a tax team. Every dollar that they spend over the tax line, they're basically paying like almost triple at this point because they're so above the luxury tax. It's insane. There's different like thresholds of it. We can get to that in the future podcast, but I think he might be a player. They already won the title. Like he might be able to leave and they might try to find somebody else that's a replacement that's a little cheaper because they had him on a minimum contract last season. So that might be something. Plus they have a bunch of rookies that they need to start playing anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I could definitely see Will Chamberlain's kin come to Miami in that case. And he's a guy that Miami's checked in on before, I believe when he was a free agent, and he re-signed with Washington for that big deal. Miami looked into it and saw if it was worth it. But he's a guy who, obviously championship experience, can space the floor. He's not going to give you versatility, but he can play the 4, he can play the 3, and you need wings like that. And he's not going to be super expensive. You combine that with some athletes in here, it could be worth Miami's interest. I still think TJ Warren at a low cost, and you save him for hopefully have him ready to go full strength by the second half of the season. I don't think this is an Oladipo thing. I think this is just he was on a tanking team and they had no reason to play him at the end of last year. Hopefully, Miami will obviously check in and see on him. I think that's a guy who scoring, that he brings a scoring punch. If Tyler, if you bring, let's say Kyle's back, Tyler wins the starting job, and you have to get a 4 like John Collins who can shoot and defend a little bit. If you're gonna play big like that, a guy like John Collins makes sense. If you're bringing a guy like TJ Warren, if Tyler's starting for you, you need scoring off the bench. And if you don't bring Depot back, you need ball handling off the bench. So you're entrusting a lot into Gabe, Max, Caleb, and TJ Warren. And TJ Warren can get you buckets, can be a 6-man of the year contender there. But you still need more. You still need some more juice there. So I'm really curious. We're gonna have a hangover time. Just real quick, guys. We are Carla Tiana saying stop with the TJ Warren, Frankie.
I don't hate it, but like I hope Miami has higher sights than bringing him as a mid-level.
That's a guy they've already been linked to, and I think he makes sense. I think he makes sense.
He makes sense if they bring him on a mid-level. Not on mid-level, on the minimum, I think.
No, I agree. I'm not saying spend money on him. Oh,
I want to make one correction before we finish. So there is actually one thing I didn't mention. Obviously there's so much. So like this Jalen Brunson news obviously happened pretty close to when we started the show. So as I was like making the numbers work and all this stuff, there's one thing I did leave out, and it is base year compensation. We can spend another show on this. I just want to make it real quick. So if, like I was saying, his projected salary would be like 26 million. The trade match is going to be a little bit harder for Miami to make. Not really for Miami. It's going to be harder for, it's going to be hard for both Miami and Dallas in one way, because base year compensation basically means if he makes more than 20%, like more than a 20% raise in his previous salary, and he's signed and traded, so it has to be only signed and trade. He basically has his salary cut in half, whatever his new contract is. So if he's making 26 million, we're talking 13 million. For trade matching purposes only. He still makes his 26 million, but in a trade match, it's 13 million. Basically, in order to make that work, Miami may need to trade Duncan Robinson in a separate trade, which this could potentially work if they do a 3-team trade with John Collins. I would have to do numbers on that later after the show. And I'll probably post it on my Twitter account, if not tonight, then tomorrow, but it could still work. I just think Miami would have to add more salary. And Dallas potentially might have to trade another player, like maybe like a Davis Bertans, to another team in order to make the salary still work. Doesn't make it not possible. It just makes it a little harder. Same way that Miami brought in Jimmy Butler. He was also base year compensation as well when they brought him in. That's why they had to do that nearly 3 to 4 team trade when they traded Josh Richardson, Hassan,
and a pick.
And then even when they did that trade, they also had to trade away Myers and Mo Harkless to just make that work under base year compensation rules. So it'd be something very similar. Actually, it wouldn't be a straight up 1-for-1 trade. So I'd like to put that correction out there on this episode for those listening to the end. Sorry that I mentioned that earlier, but I'm also mentioning it now. It's still possible. So that dream's like not dead because of that base year compensation rule. It's a stupid rule. I don't like that the MMA still has it, because they don't even call that base year compensation in the CBA anymore. But it's just one small rule that they left in there for sign trade purposes only.
Yeah.
And that's basically what it is. So he'd be counted as 13 million in salary in a trade. That's basically what would happen.
All right, and real quick, just to address the Donovan Mitchell stuff, somebody in the chat asked 2 future first rounders, Duncan, Kyle for Donovan Mitchell. The Dwayne Wade is calling Pat Riley back, gonna block his number if that's the offer. DeJounte Murray just went for 4 picks. Donovan Mitchell's gonna go for more. He has a higher reputation. If Utah makes any moves, it's Gobert. They're not selling on Donovan right now. Dwayne owes nothing to Miami. They didn't give him a spot. He's not going to play ball with us like that. They're going to try to make Donovan work, and they're going to build around him. They're going to.
He's not getting traded this season.
He's not getting traded, and if he does, it's not going to be Miami because they don't have enough.
They haven't even traded Rudy Gobert first, which is the first guy I would expect them to trade. We haven't even heard a peep about that. I'm surprised that, like, basically the team I thought would make a trade for him would be Atlanta, and they used all their picks for DeJounte Murray, which they obviously got better on defense on the perimeter point of attack. But I think what they needed more was a rim protector. Anyways, just putting that out there, like if Rudy Gobert is not traded first before Donovan Mitchell, then don't expect Donovan Mitchell to get traded before Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, they're trying to make that work for.
And they just got a really good coach. They got the assistant from Boston, their lead assistant. They're going to make that work, I think, this season, and then see what happens next season after they get eliminated in the first round again in the playoffs.
Actually, Rudy was rumored. Minnesota was checking in on him, but that
doesn't make sense.
The Cat wants to play. Cat's okay with playing the 4, but I don't get it. I thought Murray.
I don't think that makes sense. They have a lot of expensive salaries on that team. I mean. Yeah, it could make. I have to see what their contracts look like, because they could maybe move Pat Beverly's expiring and a couple other contracts and make that work for another team. It's just I don't know. Like I don't like that fit as much as I think I would on like a team like Atlanta.
Yeah, no, I mean Capella's fine. Like in the playoffs, like you don't need Gobert to do anything. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He gets played off the floor every.
He's just playing two bigs like Cat, like paying that much money for two bigs like Cat and Gobert doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I don't think it makes sense. I do think that Atlanta saw a lot of Trey's success, and like what unlocking Trey was playing DeLon with him, and DeJounte's a younger, better version of DeLon, who has an all around game, can play.
Just needs to play better off the ball. That's basically what Trey needs to do.
But they need to play Trey off the ball more because he's not a threat. He hasn't been a threat, so he needs to evolve. And Miami forced that on them. Yep. So good for them. And honestly, if that blows up, Atlanta's future is a lot grimmer. And if you take John Collins away, you get a young guy who's locked in with a decent salary, and you could potentially flip that in future contracts.
Just glad that Pat Beverly, the Miami rumors, died down.
Oh my God, I was tired of that guy.
They have Gabe Vincent, who's way better and younger right now, I think.
Yeah, why? I don't understand why anybody would do that. He wanted to do that because he wanted to get out of Minnesota
and way cheaper. He's like almost 8 times cheaper right now.
Yeah, we have comments saying we have so many guards already.
They're going to consolidate. Obviously, Duncan's the one that's going to be the one they want to consolidate the most. But I mean, it could be both him and Depot gone. And then if you lose 2 guards, then I don't know if they might need an extra guard. They need an extra wing somehow on this team. So the way they bring that in, especially if they lose PJ, I have no idea how they're going to do it. Especially if they lose Caleb too. But Miami's definitely going to need at least an extra wing from what they had last season. And I think swapping one of those guards, if it's for a 4 or a 3 that can play the 4 sometimes. That's what I think Miami should do. And I think that's what we said with John Collins. Like, he plays a 4. Obviously, he's more of a big man than a wing, but I mean, playing the 4, you're still playing around the perimeter. So it's like,
and I feel like in that situation, if they found a big man to play next to Bam, whether it's
that's priority. That's a priority for sure. Finding a big man to play next to Bam.
Oh yeah, G's never gonna agree to this. But I looked at I just keep seeing every team that wins a championship can play big and small.
Yes.
And I think you have to have that luxury to do so. Even if your best lineup is small, you have to be able to play both. And then if it can't be a thing where if we're not hitting shots, we can't force you to play small. You have to have that thing. You have to have that option in the playoffs, in the regular season. I can play small. I can play big. And if you have, here's the thing. If you have Bam at the 4, if you have a big who can space the floor a little bit, can hit the corner 3, can hit the above the break 3 like John Collins, and is also a vertical threat when healthy, diving to the rim on cuts, offensive rebounds, pick and roll ops. Bam could be your PJ in the sense that he's guarding 1 through 5. He's switching on your best defender, on the most explosive scorer on the team, and then you still have something there that at the rim. That's why I like Mo Bamba the most as a potential long-term fit, because you can probably get him for taxpayer or lower. You can probably talk him into saying, "Hey, come take earn a bigger contract this year by filling in your role, and playing consistently with a contending team." And teams will want that once they have cap space. More teams have cap space next year, I believe. And you got a guy who can shoot above the break, can protect the rim with I think somebody in the chat said he had like a 7'9" wingspan. You work on something like that. If you play Bam at the 4 and you have a rim protector, your defense, it's not the same versatility switch in the starting lineup, but you're still gonna, if you still bring back Caleb, if you with Gabe, Caleb, guys off the bench like that, you still have defensive versatility. You can still play small with Caleb. Played at the 4 a lot during the regular season. He just, injuries accumulated. And I think you need to try stuff. Like, you need to try stuff that juices your offense and take chances. This offseason has to be about getting more athletic, getting better scoring, getting more versatile on both ends. And I don't think they were that versatile on both ends. I think they were strictly a small ball team or a smaller team. And if the shot wasn't falling, if the 3-pointers weren't falling, they were a very beatable team, and they have to get more scoring inside the lane. They have to get better attacking the paint. And, one way to get better in the paint is offensive rebounds.
Yep. To that point, we never saw Miami have to face Milwaukee, in the playoffs last season. So that's a matchup we never got to see. Obviously, they play a lot bigger than Miami. Obviously, Boston was able to play smaller on them, and the way they did that was by shooting the ball really well, Grant Williams especially. So I really do think if Miami's going to go the route of trying to get a guy like John Collins because they want his ability to space the floor, and a guy like Bamba also has ability to space the floor, and same with other guys like Otto Porter Jr. and other guys we mentioned earlier. These are all guys that can space the floor and can play either the 4 or the 5. I think that's what needs to add more in this roster, because really outside of PJ, they didn't have anyone else that could do that. That was one available, because Markieff maybe could have gave you some of that, but he was hurt pretty much after the first, third of the season, and they never really put him out there again, or gave him an opportunity to really come back on the floor. And then Dedmon, yeah, he shot all right in the regular season, but he wasn't shooting at a good enough volume, and teams weren't obviously playing him at the top of the key as a shooter. Like, he had those wide open looks for a reason, because he's not really a well-known knockdown shooter. So yes, I think getting an upgrade from guys like Markieff, guys like Dedmon, and maybe even a guy like PG, even though I still would love to have him back, if you can get a guy that can shoot at a better volume rate, like, it helps for sure. It helps to be able to space the floor, give your offense more juice, and then you also have way more versatility, just like you mentioned, like to play different lineups.
And one thing about PJ, like, PJ was phenomenal this season, but we've consistently seen that when you play next to Bam, if you have somebody who hesitates shooting, has a slow release, doesn't always take the open looks when they're there, like PJ, like Myers Leonard, redacted, excuse me, it comes difficult on the offense when you get an open shot, a good look and rhythm shot, and you pass it up. You're not always going to get the same quality with a 24-second shot clock. And he need guys. That's one of the benefits of Jay Crowder. It wasn't always pretty shooting wise, but you need guys who are willing to shoot and miss. And that's ultimately why I think Max took Duncan's spot, because passing out of open looks is detrimental to this offense. So we've talked about a lot of the options here. I think we both agree that trading is probably their best option to improve. I still think they could make some improvements around the margins in free agency. There are some guys I like. I talked about Bruce Brown, Gary Harris. Patty Mills is an unrestricted free agent. He can, if you move Kyle in another trade, nothing in particular, and you need Gabe to start, you can get Patty off the bench to get some scoring for you. I don't expect anything like that to happen. I just listed him because he's a good guard. There's not many in free agency, but this free agency class is pretty bare. I don't see there's not many guys I would even consider giving the full med level to. Like, it's literally like close to it is probably Gary Harris.
Which is funny, because I think of all the guys on that list, if PJ wasn't like on the Miami Heat roster, and I saw the year that he had last season, that would be a guy obviously I would love to throw the full mid-level at and try to snag him. So that's why we're seeing the Sixers do that, because they realize that this market sucks and they really do need a guy like PJ. Fuck it. I had the full mid-level available. Let's use it on a guy like PJ. So I think that's why getting back PJ is going to be tough, because I didn't think there was going to be a team like that was going to be out there to give that money to PJ. But yeah, this market has not been great for that mid-level tier. Right? There's a handful of guys, if even, that I would give it out to. I think it would be him, maybe Otto Porter, but I don't know if I would give him the full mid-level. I'd give him
absolutely not.
A little bit more than a taxpayer, but I wouldn't give him maybe 9, 9, something like that.
Even then, that's a little high. I'd probably
I don't know,
5 to 7.
So that's the thing. PJ, Miami has a good player that's a free agent, and I think if they can bring him back and not let him walk to a contender that's on their conference, they should probably bring him back if they can.
No, they
showed you that they
better. Chat's asking a million times, what would the trade look like for John Collins? It's Duncan and a future pick, right?
Duncan and two minimums would be what you need at the very minimum to make that salaries match. It's you have to basically match, because Miami's going to be over a luxury tax. Their trade rules would be you have to trade. You can't require more than 125% of future salary plus $100,000 on that player's contract. Anyways, basically, it's going to end up amounting to Duncan plus 2 minimums would be the minimum to make the salaries work, and then whatever first-round picks that Miami would want to throw in. Obviously, I mentioned earlier, they gave up 3 first-round picks that landed to San Antonio, plus a pick swap. So I imagine they want to try to recoup some of that back.
Yeah. So it's like Duncan, Haywood Highsmith, and Yurt, basically.
Plus like a plus 1 or 2 first rounders, or a first rounder and a pick swap, something like that.
And it's probably going to be like a low. You could probably protect that because they're trying to move off of Collins, and he's he wants to get out of there. He's
and they probably would want a future first round pick for like 2027 or 2029 for Miami. And if Miami does that, obviously they're going to try to protect it so that they don't eventually think that they give up a potential top 10 lottery pick. So it wouldn't be unprotected, I don't think. But once you don't protect it, then it makes it a little bit harder to trade future picks, as we know with the OKC pick. So we'll see what happens with Miami, but that is a potential move that I think Miami could offer. Whether or not Atlanta accepts it is a different question.
And Greg mentioned this earlier. Greg Sylvander from 5 Reasons, he mentioned that we don't know how much the Heat are actually doing in the background. They're always got a bunch of things. This Jalen Brunson thing came up at the last second. We don't know all the things they're talking about behind the scenes, trade wise. We don't know trade. I think trades is the best option to improve, but we don't know what's actually out there. I know we've talked about Harrison Barnes for years. I think, Sacramento just made a draft pick for a 4, and they're trying to, make the playoffs. So I don't know why they would trade some talent for a shooter. They might value the shooting and the rookie over Harrison Barnes. There's some stuff like where we're just begging the other team to make a trade. When I love it when fans don't like Duncan and they think that other teams should just give us their player that's better than him for no reason. That's not realistic, guys. This isn't 2K. You can't force trades. Both teams need to agree with it.
Once you send out all your first round picks, that's usually the way you get around on 2K.
Yeah. Real quick, for the salary, if you're trading Duncan for Collins, here's a good question. Would they be better suited to just use that, keep that salary for a trade deadline?
I mean, I guess they could, but I feel like Miami is better off trying to see what they can get now, and then you make the upgrade for Collins now. Doesn't prevent you from trading Collins at the trade deadline.
Yeah, exactly. You see the fit. You see if there's anything to keep them together, and if there's any issues, you can always flip Collins. I think one of the things we're not talking about enough is like if you get a guy like Collins in, you can always trade that for like two guys that fill in the salary and help the depth that way. There's ways to maneuver. I think Collins is universally.
They're trying to steal him. This is basically what I'm trying to do. They're trying to steal him, and then they're also trying to steal Jalen Brunson and get him for like just Lowry, which would be swapping salaries. Exactly. So I think if Miami can do all like those 2 moves and maybe just give up 1 first round pick, that's a very successful offseason for Miami, because then next year you have 2 guys you can easily trade for a future star on top of Tyler Hero.
Yeah.
Obviously his extension is going to be interesting, but Miami has ways to go get another max guy, and if it's a guy that's already under contract, they're not hard capped, and they can do more stuff. They have the full mid-level again next year to play with, or at least a taxpayer version of it. That way they're not hot. Like, there's ways that Miami could even continue to build on this roster next season by just making those 2 trades for Brunson and Collins, and and who knows what happens next year. And I think next year's free agency class is going to be a little bit better. So
hopefully,
I think Miami knows what they want. It's whether or not they can pull it off, because it takes obviously these guys to want Miami to come here, and then also takes the other teams to accept their trade packages.
Well, I think that wraps it up. We went pretty long here. We remind you guys, we have hangover time tomorrow, 8 p.m. For a full reaction to what the first 2 hours of free agency are going to look like, and then live reaction if any free agency moves, any trades, anything happens. We'll have live reactions from the hangover team. Live
from New York.
Live from New York.
From Jalen Brunson's hotel.
Brian, thank you for bringing the big brain today. all the salary stuff. I know
I might not be on tomorrow, but if you guys do want to ask me any questions, my Twitter timeline is @bybriangoins. That's BYBRIANGOINS. Also, you can see it on, if you're watching this on YouTube in the playback, that's my handle. Tweet at me if you have any additional questions. I'll probably put out some more nuggets, if not tonight, then maybe tomorrow about the Brunson news. But yeah, appreciate you guys for all your support. Continue to donate. By the way, the donation link is still live to donate for Pride Month. So continue to do that. We actually did really well on the auctions that ended this past Monday. So really appreciate you guys who did bid on those auctions. I think we almost hit our 10K goal. But if regardless, even if we hit it, still keep donating.
Yes.
We'll put the link in our pod description and on YouTube. So if you want the link in order to continue donating, it'll be there for you guys. But yeah, appreciate everything you guys have done this month. Obviously, month of June isn't over, so keep donating. And yeah, honestly, it's been awesome what you guys have been doing in terms of supporting our charities.
Please donate. Thank you for all the donations so far. Please continue to donate, share all the links and stuff. Guys, we're not Heat DEFCON panic time and nothing like that. The Heat aren't done. They haven't even begun. Free agency starts at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, right, Brian?
Yes.
So tune in for that. All the news we'll be reacting on Twitter. We obviously hangover time tomorrow. Excited for that. Don't panic yet. The Heat can make moves. They can get better, and that's their goal. They're going to try to get better. They know this is Jimmy's window. They can be a championship contender now, and just give them trust. They've earned your trust. Relax. Calm the F down. Good night, folks.
Peace.